We were given very slight advance warning on this, but Sam Hinkie appeared on the ESPN Daily podcast with one Pablo Torre, who, holds a lot of history in both Ricky and process lore. Of course, he wrote the article that quoted Tony Roten, which mentioned in Trusting the Process, which then, became this whole thing. Pablo Torre, of course, a friend of the pod, you would say, that married a couple at the lottery party a few years back.
Yeah, actually, held the Trust the Process shirt up on Around the Horn.
Held the Trust the Process shirt up on Around the Horn.
That was then worn during the draft.
Right. So you would say that, Hinkie, and I'm of the mind, based on the conversation, that Hinkie and Pablo have had numerous conversations. Like they obviously talk quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Pablo with a very large platform, obviously, not surprising at all that Hinkie would go to Pablo to do his tell-all when Daryl Morey gets hired to be, which did seem like the impetus for this. Daryl Morey being hired as president of basketball operations for the Sixers made Hinkie go on Pablo Torre's podcast.
Yeah, he's gassing up his friend.
Yeah, and actually talking about everything. All of the things that, you would think you can't talk about, he certainly asked him. Pablo certainly asked him. I guess my question to you, Mike, is in 140 minutes of podcasting, or 100 minutes of podcasting, an hour, 40 minutes of podcasting, is it surprising to you that just to get it out of the way, to avoid a conversation like this, that neither Pablo nor Sam, with multiple opportunities, said the name of this podcast in that interview?
No.
It's not surprising to you at all?
No.
You're trying to act too cool for the room right now. It's not surprising to you?
No, it's not. I would have been surprised if they had said the name of this stupid podcast. Yeah.
Why?
Because it's not like Sam was the GM of the team. He wasn't the GM of the podcast.
Look, you can't talk to this guy for 100 minutes, and I don't care if anybody's mad at me for this. You can't talk to this guy for 100 minutes, talk about the reaction in town, the reaction from national media, the cult-like following that followed him, which we are responsible, at least in large part for. Not only responsible, but in large part responsible. And not Pablo, who has been, has dipped his water in banning before. Honestly, how do you not just say it at the very end? I'm very disappointed. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm disappointed. We'll talk about the interview.
That's very on brand for you. So I'm not surprised that I'm equally surprised that they didn't say it and that you're upset that they didn't say it. Those are the equal footing of lack of surprise.
Although, you were the one that wanted the giant say the name banner at, you wanted a 25-foot long say the name banner at the lottery party. You get mad at no name saying. You do. Don't act like you're better than me.
No, that's the thing. I get mad when they show clips of a lottery party and say Sixers fans gathered. I don't think that anytime anyone mentions the Sixers that they have to pay homage to us or anything.
Well,
although our boy Yaron Weitzman did say the name on Zach Lowe's podcast. So there you go.
And if the last question, and then we'll get into the actual interview. If Yaron had written that book and we had not been mentioned in that book, would we have even mentioned that book on a podcast?
Probably, yeah. There's good stuff on there.
He did the right thing. We're part of the story. He should have asked him. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, if Pablo was doing a, hey, let's walk me through every step of it.
Right.
Then I think that, him at least getting his banner raised to the rafters would have been a question to ask.
Right.
But we know how Sam feels about it.
Well, maybe they cut some out. Maybe Pablo's saving it.
Yeah, saving it. Saving it for your birthday.
All right. So it is amazing. And as Sam Hinkie is very good at doing, and he did, say that he was happy for Daryl and Daryl will do a great job and Daryl was the right guy, so on and so forth. Sam does do an excellent job of answering questions thoughtfully and not actually answering the question.
He always has.
Yes, he's expert at it. He's amazing at it. And he will put certain words in there that do sort of give him an out of the responsibility for the answer that you thought that he gave. Sort of like the one where he said, because Pablo asked about the idea of specifically treating Embiid. That's what he asked him. And then Hinkie goes something to the effect of, well, you should remember how hard it was to get any of them. He doesn't. He talks about all of the players. He doesn't even specifically answer the question about Embiid, and he doesn't even say yes or no, which I think is amazing. You better think real hard about that. Is all he says.
I think that's who he is. I think he is a absolutely singular weirdo. I love him. I think he's great. I would, if we were actually good friends, I would roast him constantly for his ridiculous brain working overtime on the dumbest shit. But I respect it. I think he's certainly a delightful listen. I thought Pablo did a great job of like, not holding him to account or anything, but really asking him some tough, made him answer some tough questions. I don't think that Sam does it. You know, Brian Colangelo, I remember Brian was on Derek's podcast a while ago. I think this was paywall Godner era. And I think Derek asked 3 questions, and Brian just spent 20 minutes talking about really whatever the fuck he wanted.
Yeah, just like filibustering.
Sam doesn't, right, filibustering. Sam doesn't do that. Sam answers your question in a thoughtful way without really coming down on it, because I think that's just how his brain works. I think he just likes to think at every angle of the question, and he's not, you know, he's already done the work of thinking about it, and him being like, were you surprised at this or that? He's like, no, I can see it. Like, I know, I get why they fired me. I understand it. Like, he's not going to get, I think he's done a good job of, maybe he's not this way in the moment, but when he comes back and thinks about things, I think he does think about things from so many different angles that he takes the emotion out of it, at least on his end, and can see where people are coming from. Yeah.
And by the way, like I've said before that I don't think he is angry at Josh Harris or David Blitzer or any of those things, but it is hard to talk about the emotion. His farewell letter is both very good and very well written and so pissy at the same time. Even if he would never admit it, it was pissy.
I would just ask him, so how much pissiness did you put into the line, Scott O'Neill can ably separate the people of Delaware Valley from their wallets on your behalf? Like, how much did you, when you did that, was like some pee leaking out of your, you know, just a little bit because you just like had to put it in there? Or did you kind of like do a little shimmy as you wrote that? Because I would have.
So here are the things, and you alluded to this earlier, here are the things that I felt like he did actually answer. One of them was he actually gave the true answer, but the other ones were sort of, you had to be listening for it a little bit. You mentioned earlier how close the Sixers we talked about it extensively, how close the Sixers may or may not be. Hinkie said, I think at 3 different moments, that if Morey is given enough time to yada, 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 or if he is, it did not seem like, given his answers, that he thought this particular Sixers team was that close to a championship, that there was a lot of work to do. Not that it was impossible, but that it would take time for Morey to do it. Did you get that same sense from
I think he said it almost word for word. He's like, I don't think this is a team that's going to win a championship next year, or like on the cusp, or it's an easy like knocking whatever. And I think that, like I said before, I think that it is a couple. There's ways to put yourself in that situation so that you're like, you know, the way Sam thinks about it. Are they a 3% chance right now? Maybe could you get them to 8%, like with more ball handlers and buy-in from these guys and willingness of Ben to shoot, whatever, like any number of things, could that like inch yourself up and then all of a sudden like things look good and whatever? I think so, but I think Sam looks at things from a, you know, very clinical way, and odds are they're not going to win a championship next year. I think you wouldn't lose much money by betting that. But I do think that there's a chance that they can get there in such a weird season.
Another thing, he asked him specifically about Simmons and the fit of the two, and then asked about Ben Simmons. He sort of gave innocuous answers about the fit of the two, but when
he said he doesn't really, he's like, look, I'm not paid to watch them. Like I watch some, I don't watch all. I'll watch fourth quarters and all that stuff. And this has always been the case. Like I've been saying for years, don't watch all the games.
Yes.
Or only watch the wins.
And look at how successful Sam Hinkie is not watching all the games.
Oh, so good at it.
So great. Seems so happy. By the way, the one thing, I don't share very many things at all, I would say, in life with Sam Hinkie. But at the end, he mentioned that he will not tell his wife what he is ordering at a restaurant because he doesn't want her decision based on his. So and good. I 100% agree. It infuriates my wife every time, but I will not tell her.
That's insane. You guys are both out of your minds. Really, just like I would absolutely just listen to a podcast of Sam Hinkie's wife being like, this fucking guy, he makes it so hard for me to just like being around him. Like I
just want to know what he's getting. I just want to know what he's getting.
I don't mind a hedge. Yeah. I like a hedge. Give me more options to eat. It widens your chance of having good bites of things.
He did ask him about, so he talked about Ben Simmons shooting threes, and Hinkie responded basically saying he needs to get to the line more. He needs to basically throw himself at defenders. He brought up Jimmy Butler to get at the line more. He needs to finish with both hands.
Absolutely.
He needs to athletically finish over defenders with both hands. It sounded like it was one of the answers he had sounded like he has already thought about. Mm-hmm. And we've mentioned it a million times. It always comes in concert with the shooting thing, is the getting to the line thing, which is for sure. And I think we talked about it on the last podcast. That's what LeBron did. LeBron was so big and strong and fast and could dribble that in the early part of his career, he did that constantly. And it's something that Ben needs to do, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tobias obviously less athletic, but I think about the same stuff with him. Like, you need to be able to get to the line regularly and get easy looks at it. And Sam told a story about like Chuck Hayes, about how he's shooting like 50% from the line, and that's not great, but that's still like 1 point per possession. Like, for the most part, you take that.
Well, and it gets a foul on the other team.
Yeah.
You know, which puts you in a more advantageous position in terms of the quarter, getting to the line and fouling that person out. And I think the other thing, he talks to Embiid regularly, which didn't surprise any of us.
So sweet.
Yes. The other thing that he said, him coming back to the Sixers was always fan fiction. That was never going to happen. Yeah. He did, and he said 0% chance, which totally unsurprising. Him coming back to the NBA, he said 0% chance.
Yeah.
Which is not surprising to me that he wouldn't ever come back. Was surprising to me that he said he would never come back.
Yeah.
As somebody who only deals in likelihoods and percentages and understands what 0% means.
Yes, I agree. I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I think he's gotten this status of, lionized by so many people, and this sort of mysterious, Pablo called him like J.D. Salinger type. I think that like the expectations of what he would have if he came back and just like was the, if he was like, hey, I'm now the GM of the Magic and we're finishing like 42-40. Like, what a sad story that would be. And so I think like the expectations of what would be expected, plus the like genuine lot of work and commitment that would have to be put in. I think he's like, look, I'm kind of, and he wouldn't say this, but like, look, I'm kind of famous now. I'm famous in like a bunch of areas. I can kind of do whatever I want.
Right.
I can get excited about young people. I can like, I can consult with the Denver Broncos or whatever. I can kind of dabble and stuff and just make money as this,
well, he's a venture capitalist now, which is something that you're into.
I'm so into it. I'm surprised that Pablo didn't ask him about fixing email. I thought that would have been pretty high on my list of questions. And it's like, how are you going to fix email? I wonder, like, any bugs or anything that you're going to, dabble in. But no, I think that I'm surprised that it was 0 also, but I think in his mind, the risk reward and plus he kind of gets to do whatever he wants right now is worthy enough. And he felt, I'm surprised he didn't give like a 1%, like a little out for himself.
The Michael Jordan 99.9% retiring thing. But then, of course, here's the other thing I would say. If you're looking at it from his perspective, if he says, I'm happy now. I'm 99% sure I would never come back. The headline becomes Sam Hinkie leaves open possibility of return to NBA. If he says this and he decides to come back one day, nobody's like penalizing him for saying
I will penalize him. Me and you have to hold him to account as arbiters of truth that we will penalize him for coming back and if he runs the Hornets or something.
We'll ban him then.
Can't do it. You said no. You said 0.
I heard it. I heard you say 0.
Yeah.